The first speaker now is Mr. Stefan Leiner, Acting Director for Natural Capital in DG Environment, European Commission. Mr. Leiner joined the European Commission in 1999. He has been dealing with international and EU forest and biodiversity policy issues in key positions. He is now heading the Biodiversity Unit, which is dealing with the implementation of the EU 2020 Biodiversity Strategy. He is also currently Acting Director of the Natural Capital Directorate. Mr. Leiner's presentation will be about where we stand with biodiversity at the moment. Mr. Leiner, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to, on behalf of the European Commission, really heartfully thank the organizers of this forum, the Ministry of Environment of Finland, FIPS, and the CBD Secretariat, as we feel it is really a very important and timely meeting, and I'm very honored to be able to say a few words, actually following up on from what Amy has said, moving from the global picture to where we are in Europe in as far as biodiversity goals and objectives and fulfilling them are concerned. Now, as you know, this year was not only an important year at the global scale, but also in Europe we have published a series of important documents telling us where we are. There was a State of Environment report by the European Environment Agency. There was a more specific report on the state of nature in the European Union issued in April. And just a few weeks ago, on the 2nd of October, we published the midterm review of our EU biodiversity strategy. Now, this midterm review is really showing what progress have we done in the various actions and targets that are in our EU biodiversity strategy, which is in fact our roadmap in order to fulfill the CBD roadmap, the IG targets and the strategic plan in Europe. There is a headline objective to halt and reverse the loss of biodiversity, the ecosystems and the services they provide in the EU, but also scaled up and enhance our contribution towards averting global biodiversity loss. And there are 6 targets, or headline targets, under this strategy. And the midterm review has showed that we done a lot of progress, actually, in implementing the various actions under those targets. Target 1 is about implementing our EU nature legislation, the Birds and Habitats Directive. We have established a very impressive network of protected areas, which we call Natura 2000, that has more than 27,000 sites all over Europe. That is now covering more than 18% of the terrestrial landscape. And we have also made a big progress in designating sites in the marine area, where we moved just in a few years from 4% of our marine zones to 6%. But of course there is still more to be done. We also did a lot of progress under what we call Target 2, which is about restoring a 15% restoration target. We have done a lot of progress in conceptualizing and making it concrete on how we can map and value ecosystems and their services. We have published a communication on green infrastructure, which really demonstrates that biodiversity and nature is not just something of animals and species, but it's really providing a lot of infrastructure that is the basis for our well-being, and it's worth investing in this infrastructure, not only connecting the sites to each other, but also in urban areas, etc., having more nature around us that is fulfilling its role as much as possible. We have also established, for example, a new natural capital financing facility that you will hear more from the European Investment Bank, because it's together with them that we have set up this facility that really tries to give loans towards private projects and other projects that we think can be bankable in order to make sure and demonstrate that investing in biodiversity conservation pays off also financially. We have done a lot of progress, for example, in reforming our common agricultural policy, where we have adopted greening measures of the first pillar, but also made sure that in the second pillar, in the rural development, funding for biodiversity and Natura 2000 is possible for member states to use this enormous part of the EU budget also for biodiversity. The EU forestry strategy has a lot of biodiversity elements really as its core of our sustainable forest management concept in the European Union. We have reformed also our common fisheries and maritime policy, and the new European Fisheries Funds has a lot of additional measures aimed at making sure that our fisheries policies helps in achieving sustainable stocks of our fisheries. We also have adopted a new regulation on invasive alien species, which is really one of the few areas where there has been remarkable new environmental legislation in Europe. And we have fulfilled our commitments that we have set out under the CBD to enhance our global financial support in development cooperation. We also have adopted a series of rules in order to make sure, for example, that we import only legally harvested forest products in our FLEGT regulation and our timber regulation. So really a lot has been done in Europe in the past years we can be proud of. But the report also shows that while we are mid-term in the implementation of our strategy, we are not midway. We still believe that we can achieve our targets, but we will need to massively scale up the efforts in Europe in order to really achieve them. And there are a number of areas where we need to focus our efforts. First of all, we need to really fully implement our nature legislation. We need to make sure that those sites are not on paper, but they really are effectively managed. We need to make sure that they are effectively financed. We are at the moment doing a fitness check of this nature legislation. We really look at to what have we achieved, what have we not yet achieved, and the business is very active in this fitness check. They really welcome that there is a stable and predictable legislative framework that is creating a level playing field in Europe, but there are also ways to make sure that this can be better implemented, reducing as much as possible unnecessary burden, but also making sure that the implementation is working well. I think the biggest challenge is probably when you also look at the species and habitats that have yet or not yet achieved a favorable conservation status. You will see that those that are related to agriculture are not only having the worst conservation status, but even continue to be degraded in Europe. So making sure that our agricultural policy and the reform of the CAP I mentioned gives a lot of opportunities to member states to take the right or the wrong choices as far as if the first pillar and the second pillar will effectively be beneficial for our nature and biodiversity. And that is a major challenge, to make sure that those decisions are being made, that as much as possible, on one hand, the intensification of agriculture, on the other, the abandonment of extensive agriculture is being halted and reversed, or made in a way that you can achieve your economic objectives, but you also can make sure that these do not against water and biodiversity and nature quality. So we also have to make sure, for example, that all these concepts we are developing on restoration, on mapping, assessment, ecosystem services, on establishing ways to actually account for the ecosystems and the services that provide, that these really become to be integrated in the economic systems that are really creating the enabling framework under which we take political, financial, economic decisions, all the actors, public and private. And that will be a major step forward that we need to work on, that we really develop these tools and integrate them also into our mainstream financial and economic framework. That will be a major challenge that we have in Europe. And business plays a key role in that. Business is really one of our major partners, and business can do a lot in order to help us in achieving the targets. They can, for example, rely on green infrastructure and nature-based solutions in, for example, investing in their business opportunities. They can improve their supply chains with better traceability and sustainable sourcing. They can actually better measure their impacts and dependencies on natural capital. For example, by developing environment, profit and loss accounts, natural capital balance sheets, etc. they can themselves increase their investments in biodiversity measures. We will not achieve our objective if we only rely on public funding. We really need to have the support from the private sector there. And overall, I would say they can make biodiversity protection a business opportunity rather than seeing this as a regulatory burden. So in Europe, we take really the business and biodiversity agenda very seriously. We have actually our own business and biodiversity platform of the EU, and we had a few days ago our second annual meeting of that platform. And that really demonstrated that the platform is growing. There are now more than 250 members, of which more than 100 businesses, including more and more SMEs and also representatives from the financial sector. And a lot has been happening, but we still feel that there are best and first movers. There is a lot of positive action happening, and we really will hear a lot during this week of what is happening globally and in Europe. But we, again, need to scale up the efforts in order that caring for business really becomes part of the core DNA of all of the businesses in Europe and in the world. So I really look very much forward to this 2 days here in Helsinki. This is really a great opportunity to pick up the momentum, to see where we are, to hear everything that is happening around the world. But I hope we will all be able to go back from this meeting with new inspirations and a new commitment to really, as I repeat again, scale up massively the efforts that we are doing in Europe and in the world so that we can be there in 2020 and say, yes, we have achieved our biodiversity objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leiner.